And I messed up already. That's a good way to start the Tuesday morning live stream. Got overly ambitious on how prepped I was for that.
You keep wearing the trainee badge for now.
I guess so.
Hey, welcome to Creator Toolbox. Thank you for joining us. I am Chuck Tomasi, Senior Developer Advocate at ServiceNow. And this is a show to do exactly what the title says, help you put tools in your toolbox, you ServiceNow developers and admins. And we've got some great stuff for you today. Before we get into that, quick introduction. As I mentioned, I'm a Senior Developer Advocate, been with ServiceNow since 2010, was a customer a couple of years before that, and have a development history spanning into, well, let's just say, I think stone something wasn't even invented yet. I think stones were invented.
Predates stone. Oh my gosh.
Over to you, Lauren.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren McManaman. I am the newest addition, as you can see by my slight faux pas with the live streaming platform this morning. I joined at the beginning of July to the developer advocacy team, but been a member of the ServiceNow community for about 8 years, 5 of which at ServiceNow itself. Background making lots of low and mid code apps, and excited to be kind of doing it now to help y'all and help me help you the best that we can. And I'll take it to our special guest down below as well, Brooks.
Hey everyone, I'm Brooks Hawkins, and I'm a Principal Product Manager on the App Engine team here at ServiceNow. I've been with ServiceNow for about a year and a half. My focus is on governance and citizen development success. And prior to joining ServiceNow, at my previous employer, I actually started a citizen development program and scaled that to over 350 citizen developers.
Very nice.
That's fantastic.
Wow. But she knows what she's talking about.
Might have to bring you back on and talk more about that now that you've let the cat out of the bag. Well, today, if you're joining us here today is Creator Toolbox, which is our standard live stream to cover in kind of a more formal way all of the latest and greatest features coming out in the newest release. As many of you might know, as of, I believe, Wednesday, Tokyo will be out to the general audience, which is extremely exciting. It's bringing lots of new functionality, a lot of which we've already shown. But one of the last vestiges to kind of cover as part of our new content is that of App Engine Management Center. App Engine Management Center came out relatively soon. It came out in the San Diego release. So this is the second iteration of this entity. But Brooks, how would you describe the purpose and kind of the place the App Engine Management Center has on the platform, just for people that might not have used it yet?
Yeah, so App Engine Management Center is the admin's one-stop shop to manage all their custom app development, from request management to actually getting into visibility of what are my developers building, what are they doing on my dev instance, and being able to look into what apps are in prod that have been built already so that you can start to monitor them as well.
That's fantastic. So today we are specifically covering, if we point up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen with my left hand, it's mirrored, these are the specific Tokyo new features that we are going to be covering today. And so with that being said, I will switch things over to Brooks to drive and show us all the latest and greatest, and Chuck and I will add our comments where it is appropriate.
Awesome. All right. So for those that have not seen App Engine Management Center before, this is App Engine Management Center. It sits on your production instance, and with the power of our App Engine pipelines, we bring all the data to the production instance. So just briefly to what came out in our initial release from San Diego was our request management piece. So with App Engine, we ship a application intake request where users can actually submit app ideas, and the admin can approve these app ideas and actually select the instance that they would want the user to develop on. And if the user already exists on that development instance, but does not have access to AES already, then once they approve this request, so say Marcus does not have access already, he would automatically be added to the App Engine Studio user group and get the notification that his app idea was approved and can go ahead and get started with his development. We also have collaboration requests. So inside of App Engine Studio, if we open one of our apps, which I'm going to focus on throughout this demo, we have this icon here. So if a user wanted to add somebody to help them build on this app, they could add any sort of collaborator. The admin can create different descriptors that have different permission sets so that the collaborator only has the right access within this app to help them finish it. So in this case, David added Abel as a mobile developer to help him with the mobile app for emergency alerts. And if the collaborator already has access to AES, so in this case, Abel already had access to AES, his collaboration request would be auto-approved, so you're not creating any bottlenecks within those requests, and you're letting the app owner really manage those requests. But if Able Tutor hadn't had access to AES already, then there would be a request that comes into App Engine Management Center for the admin to review. This way, no one is getting access to App Engine Studio without the admin actually reviewing who that person is, what are their skill sets, and making sure that they're ready to actually develop an App Engine Studio.
This is fantastic because I know that when I worked my job prior to this was solution consulting. So I was dealing a lot with customers prior to purchasing something like App Engine Studio, or excuse me, App Engine in general. And one of the biggest hesitancies was governance. You see that a lot with these citizen or low and no code apps of like, hey, we don't want it to be like the Wild West of development. We've seen this happen time and time again with similar, older platforms. So this is kind of not only providing a union of visibility into all the types of people and applications running on your various instances, but also the governance pieces that were kind of set up in the past, but now you're kind of providing a nice union between those. This is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. While there's a need, right, to expand development teams outside of your core ServiceNow team, there's risk involved in that. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and our goal is to make it as easy as possible for both the admin and the developer so that the platform can be protected, but developers can still do what they need to do.
Yeah.
So something else I'd like to add in here that I was inspired by App Engine Management Center is the fact that you've got that intake available to you. And think beyond that as developers, when you're making custom applications, build in some sort of support mechanism to your application. Extend that task table so that your app has, maybe you're dealing with a custom application for customers on a portal. They have a way from that portal to say, I've got an enhancement idea for your app, or I spotted a potential issue, or I've got a data integrity concern. These are ways that the people can interact with you to reduce calling. How do they get support when you've got ideas like this, especially for those very bespoke applications? I just saw a demo this morning that somebody made like a restaurant waiter application where they take their mobile application, they say table 6 wants, a steak and potato dinner and 2 large Sprites, and it's like, okay, so what do you do when you've got an idea for that? Or the waiter has an idea for that, or the customer spots an issue, or, think about ways to not just fulfill the core requirement of the application. In this case, App Engine Management Center, moving those apps through the cycle of dev, test, prod, knowing where they are, getting the approval to do the pipelines, that kind of thing. But also those secondary and tertiary activities. How do users fully interact with your system? So didn't want to pontificate too much about that, but it's a great idea to think about.
Yeah, and the intake form is a standard catalog item, so it can be customized, and you can add questions, remove questions, whatever makes sense, right? So if you want to collect that information up front, like who's going to support this when it's in production? and make sure that you have all that documented in that intake form, you can definitely do that and think about that entire governance process from intake all the way to an app actually being in production.
The question of ownership after development is one I would argue should be on every intake request,
Yes.
having been bitten by it before. Oh, I'll volunteer for this project. Wait, why do I own this now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just make a new catalog item for like last will and testament of my application. Should I leave the company, I bequeath this application to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so then the third type of request is our deployment request. So in this case, I am impersonating David Liu, and he has built his app for emergency alerts for BH Bakery Corporation, and he's ready to submit it to go to production. So he's on development here. He's going to put in some release notes. I'm going to put in something very simple. Hopefully David actually would put in something more detailed for the admin. And then he's going to go ahead and submit that request. And jumping back over to production in App Engine Management Center, the App Engine admin can now review. You can see now we have a new request that has come in, and the admin can actually review these apps directly inside this visual pipeline. So the admin sets up these pipelines for deployment, and this is what actually helps us get all the data from other instances into production. But it's also what we use to actually deploy apps to production. So you can see there's this new request for the BH Bakery Corp emergency alerts app. And it's the reason this is empty right here is because the flows in the background are still running. But if I open one of the apps that is already ready to go to test, you can see you also have this visual pipeline here in the request. In the notes, you're gonna have an app manifest. This app is a little bit light, only has a couple of file types here, but it'll at least give you an idea of what types of files, what types of tools are being used inside of this particular app. Lots of app details, including a URL on dev if the admin needs to go look at what the app is, requester details, deployment details. If you had multiple pipelines, you'd be able to see, which development instance did it come from, what pipeline is it in, and where is it going next. And once I approve that, it's going to go to test, and it's actually going to generate a new approval. So if I jump to my testing request here, and it's going to take some time for that request to actually run because we are running some ATF test cases and instance scan checks on that app. So any app that is going through a testing type instance are going to have those suites run automatically, and every customer can customize what test cases and checks are inside of those suites. They can add whatever they need to make sure that their apps are adequately tested. And those results are written both to the activity stream, just a summary with a link to the actual detailed results, and then also to our deployment environment results table. So you can quickly see how many test cases were successful, if there were any failures, if there were any instance scan findings. And you can see now, instead of 4 approvers and 1 group approval, it's doubled because we regenerated a new approval on the same deployment request. And so now the admin can come in, review the test results, and then approve it to go to production.
Now, this is something that is really, really piquing my interest because in sales, I was always horrified and shocked how few people utilize something like ATF. So ATF, if you haven't heard of it, is the automated testing framework that ServiceNow has had for a couple of years now, I would argue, right, Chuck? At least 2.
Yeah,
if not longer.
5 or 6. It's been out for quite some time.
It's been out for a long time. But basically, in computer science, they sing the praises of what's called test-driven development, kind of setting up your tests and imagining how you would see like edge cases and how your applications would handle that from the beginning. It promotes a lot of really good developer behavior. So seeing that type of, again, union, it's like bringing together all these pieces of ServiceNow within App Engine Management Center. So seeing the results of that built in, I couldn't sing the praises of that more, because it also promotes people to use it more often. It's a huge way to avoid a lot of burnt out time with just doing simple tests that are the same every time you deploy.
Yeah, absolutely. And helps, as you're growing that team, to make sure you're not creating bottlenecks and creating more work for the admin teams.
Yeah.
And these pipelines are completely configurable. Customers can create as many pipelines as they want, and every pipeline can have as many environments in the pipeline as needed. So they could have 4, they could have 5, they could have 2. It's up to the admin. The only thing that needs to be unique on a particular pipeline is the development instance. So we've had customers that have 2 development instances, but 1 testing and 1 production. So they would actually create 2 pipelines. Each one has a different development 1, development 2, but their testing and production are the same. And that way they can they can keep their development segmented, but it's still using this automated pipeline that's all controlled through production in App Engine Management Center.
What would be a use case in which someone would use a different pipeline for an application, for one application versus another?
Yeah, so it's usually based on how the admins have their development already set up, or in some cases, maybe they're extending to citizen development and they want to keep their pro developers on one development instance. And then they want to spin up a new development instance that's specifically for citizen developers. So that would be a use case. We've also seen customers that have maybe a development instance for specific departments. Maybe one department does a ton of development work, and so they need their own development instance. So in that case, they would have their own development instance, and because you have multiple development instances, you would need multiple pipelines. And then the third big use case would be, once you have a more mature development program, especially like citizen development program, is you might want to have more of like a dynamic governance approach. So when you're doing those intake requests, you might say, oh, this app, super simple, form-based, standard catalog item, not a lot of complexity. It's for one team to use, not a lot of risk. Maybe it doesn't need to go through a testing and stage instance. Maybe it's a development to production app.
Yeah, you're just changing the color of something or something simple like that.
Exactly. And then you might have apps that are way more complex that need to go through a development, testing, stage, production. And so that's a different way that you can do pipeline. So it kind of depends on how customers set up, but there's definitely different use cases for having multiple pipelines.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Just so I'm clear, Brooks, you in your first couple of instances, in your first couple of examples, in your first couple of examples, you had multiple dev instances for those multiple pipelines. You can do different pipelines with a single dev test prod, for example, correct?
Yes, you can do multiple pipelines with a dev test prod. Yeah, they can be the same number. The only thing that needs to be unique in a particular pipeline is the development instance. And then that's just because, like, if you open this, we need to know which environment the request originated from.
Okay, but maybe I didn't ask it right. It's still not clear in my mind, and hopefully I can help somebody who's watching as well. Let's take the use case of you know, you've got the simple form or catalog item based application that you just want to go dev to prod. But I've also got more complex apps that need to go dev, test, prod with the full ATF, instance scan, everything around that. With that, good dog, good dog.
It's all good.
Would those two different pipelines imply that I need two different dev instances?
With the current way our pipelines are set up, yeah, they would need separate dev instances. Yeah. Sorry about that. We had somebody come to the door and ring the doorbell.
It is all good.
It wasn't me.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be a Zoom without an animal sound.
Right.
No
yeah,
way.
absolutely. Yeah. So currently, the way the pipelines are set up, you would have to have a separate development instance,
Okay.
even if you had those simple forms. So if you had, like you had a citizen development, or maybe you had dev instances that you use based on governance level, like you have one that's like, I just want all my simple stuff here and my complex stuff here. That's a way that you could do multiple pipelines.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. So that is a recap of everything that came out in San Diego. And now we're going to get into Tokyo.
Woohoo.
So here is our applications page. So you can see that there is a summary of all the apps that are in my development instances that are defined by the pipelines and production. So we have summary about how many apps there currently are total across both instances, how many apps are in production, how many are in development, how many are in an active deployment, and then we break it down by department. And so we use what the collaboration descriptor owner to decide, who created this app and which department that person belongs to. So this is helpful when you're expanding outside of IT to see, which departments are actually utilizing AES or app development and building their own apps. And you can actually come in here and open a deployment request not a deployment request, an application record. And you'll be able to see the deployment history of that app, as well as any collaborators on that app, as well as some of the descriptors. And so you can, make sure that you know what's happened with this app. Maybe someone has put in a request or a ticket that, the newest version of Bakery Corp emergency alerts, something's wrong with it. So let me go see what the deployment history is. When did it go into production? Has it actually, if there were multiple deployment requests here, did we push something recently that caused a bug? So that's a quick way to see deployment history for a single app. And then just seeing that activity of what custom apps are being built. And so we're bringing in any app that is a custom app that's on the sysapp table. So it's not just limited to apps that are created in App Engine Studio.
Nice.
That's huge.
And then next up, we have our developers page. So similar concept here. You're expanding that development program. You want to know who has access in your development instance. And so we're bringing in any developer that has access that's part of the AES user group or has the AES user role, and any developer that has a delegated development role. So again, not just limited to AES. You'll be able to manage any of your developers, breaking that down by department. This is going to show you the developers that have been active in the last 30 days. So you see, I have 28 developers that haven't really been doing development. So you need to go through and make sure people that have access still have the right access. You'll be able to narrow down, who's actually using the development tools. And then I can open up one of these developers. So I can open up David Blue, and I can actually see any of the apps that he is a collaborator on. And then I can see his full request history. So any intake requests that he has submitted, any collaboration requests, any deployment requests. And so this is just, the start of the information that we're going to be bringing in on apps, developers, to help admins get that full visibility into their custom app development.
Yeah, and see if they're actually using the permissions that have been granted to them too. Because obviously, like you said earlier, like obviously you don't want a team to be one king to the castle, but with every key that you give away, it could be seen as a security liability. So we want to make sure that people that have access to stuff are A, using it, and B, using it correctly. And this definitely gives a lot more information on whether or not that's true or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of like mitigating that risk is, making sure people have the right access and making sure that you're not having, app sprawl in both development and in production. You want to make sure that you're, keeping some tabs on what's going on your instances.
What is the little blue? So is this information? Obviously, this is probably being pulled in from like an Active Directory or just like the regular user table, correct?
Yeah, it's from the user table. So any of the information on the user table in production. So we are actually getting all of the developers from the development instances based on what is defined in the pipeline. And then we're joining that up with what's in production to get the user information, knowing that production is typically the source of truth for that type of information.
Yeah, so I was about to ask, because these are usually on the developer instance, right, to access like the management center.
So yeah, AMC sits on production.
That's right, correct.
Yeah, but the developers, all of these people have access in my dev instance, but I'm viewing it from production. And that was the Tokyo Store 1 release that should now be available to anyone that has GA for Tokyo. This portion, the application developer pages, are dependent on Tokyo Family, even though the App Engine Management Center is a store release.
Fantastic. Are there any, so if people were liking to go, if they hadn't had App Engine Management Center activated on San Diego, are there any tips and tricks that if they saw this and were really excited about it and they're an App Engine customer, is there anything they have to do specifically to turn this on?
So it's just only for licensing, they would need to just make sure they have the correct license to get App Engine Management Center. But they would just download it from the store. And it's a pretty simple setup, especially if you already have pipeline set up. App Engine Management Center is heavily dependent on pipelines. So besides setting up pipelines and then the intake request, if you would like to use that, the only thing you have to do is actually install AEMC and promote it up to production so that you can use it.
Love that. Was there anything else, or were there any questions from the audience that we missed, Chuck? Or
no, a lot of good positive feedback, but no questions at this point. We can always give people a minute to do that. Just want to thank you, Brooks, and a reminder to everybody that we do have a podcast with Brooks coming out tomorrow on September 21st, as we record this on the 20th. You can find that at devlink.sn/breakpoint. We have all of the Tokyo content on our Tokyo page. So devlink.sn/Tokyo is where you can find all of that to stay informed. If you miss something, there's links to the existing content. If you want to know what's coming up, there's still several weeks left in October and into November for Tokyo content. We've even had a few product managers reach out to us and say, hey, how do we get on that calendar? And we're trying to find the opening so that we don't break Earl, Lauren, or me. But everybody's all excited about this stuff, and we're happy to bring it to you.
Yes.
Kevin Eldred says, how did it make the connection from prod to the other instances? I might have missed that if it was mentioned. Great question.
Yeah, so we are using for our pipelines for like all the request management piece. When you set up pipelines, you set up these environment fields that have credentials, the URL, the instance ID. Let's see if this will, there we go. So in this case, I have, my development, production, testing, I have credentials, and then I've set my production instance to true for is controller. And so the production instance actually controls everything that's going on with the pipeline. And we're using the flow designer and CI/CD spoke. So once a user submits that request, that deployment request in development, we're going to publish the app to the app repo. Once the admin approves it, then we're going to figure out which environment is next in the pipeline, which is defined on the pipeline table. So in this case, we ordered the different environments, testing being the second one, and then production. And so once the admin approves it, it's going to be installed on test, runs all those ATF instant scan checks, and then you repeat that through the pipeline. For this part for Tokyo Store 1, we're using remote tables using the pipeline and the App Engine Management Center plugins. So we need the plugins installed on subprod instances. And then we're using this pipeline information to actually send that data to production in a remote table.
This makes update sets look like, a house of sticks and dirt. It really does. And this is a 5-star hotel. This is awesome. We got another question from Bhupinder. He says, how are enhancements managed via AEMC?
So enhancements would be the same thing, and it can be dependent on how the customer does their enhancements, right? So if you already gave, David Liu access to AES, and you're just like, you do your enhancements and then submit a deployment request whenever you're ready, then they just have their access, they do their enhancements, they put it in the release notes, submit a new deployment request. If you want to collect enhancements as part of like an intake request, you could add, some questions in the intake that, toggle, is this enhancement, is it a new app? And have a process around asking your developers to put in requests for enhancements. Once you approve it, they can go in, add the enhancements, and then they go through the exact same process. So some of the apps have actually already been to production multiple times, and they have a much longer deployment history. I think this Angry Kitten. So here you can see Angry Kitten has actually been to production twice, and has 2 different versions, and this would be the latest version in production.
Nice. So you got history of what's been done. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Angry Kitten. Well, I don't see much more. Kevin says, I don't want to use update sets anymore. So I think this is a success.
Feelings mutual.
Yeah, tuck your boss into that App Engine license if you don't already have it. This is where it's going to pay dividends. That's all I see. So thank you very much, Brooks. Again, everybody, if you want to check out the Tokyo content, devlink.sn/Tokyo is where you can find that. We've got a podcast coming up. General availability for Tokyo is available starting tomorrow, so you can start upgrading your sub prods. And, well, if you're brave enough, upgrade prod tomorrow. Check with
The
your
bonus
risk and
points.
compliance team first.
That's true.
Mhm.
And you know where to find us if you got any questions or comments. Thank you again, Brooks. Thanks for pushing the buttons and getting the comments and things in there, Lauren. And everybody take care, stay safe, and we will talk to you real soon. Bye.